My name is Matthew Kaler, and I'm the Executive Director of the Wildwest Institute here in Missoula, Montana. Together with the Environmental Action Community, we are co-sponsoring the Northern Rockies Nature Forum series. This is, I think, our third year of doing these series, which they're community-oriented discussions about the ecology, biodiversity, protection, and restoration of landscapes here in the Northern Rockies. Tonight's forum is entitled Visions for a Sustainable Montana. The format of the forum will be short presentations by our four panelists, about 15 minutes each, followed by questions and answers from the audience. The next forum, Actualizing Montana's Restoration Economy, will take place in this room on Tuesday, October 24th. And the best way to find out about upcoming forums and other stuff that we're doing at the Wildwest Institute is to sign the sign-in sheet that we'll pass around, probably during the question and answer, just so it doesn't impact our panelists here. So we do have four panelists tonight, and I'll introduce them all as they come up. But just to give their names right now, Josh Slotnick with Garden City Harvest, Larry Evans, with the Western Montana Mycological Association, Luann Crowley with MUD, the Missoula Urban Demonstration Project, and Steve Loken, who is president of Loken Builders, and tonight is representing Arrow and going to talk about sustainable energy. So this is a little bit of a different forum topic than the rest of our topics. It's a little bit somewhat outside of what we do at the Wildwest Institute. We're working more on forest and wildland issues, but we're working every day on sustainability as it pertains to sustaining the landscape around Missoula, the national forests, the wildlands, the wildlife. And what we thought would be really cool is to have some of the movers and shakers and some of the folks here in the Missoula community who are really thinking about how to get our community more sustainable, have them come and share what their vision is for a sustainable Missoula and a sustainable Montana. So hope you enjoy the program tonight. Our first speaker is going to be Josh Slotnick, who's the farm director for the Missoula nonprofit organization Garden City Harvest, and he's an adjunct professor in the environmental studies program at the university, where he runs the PEAS program, which is an acronym for Program in Ecological Agriculture and Society. Josh has been farming in Missoula for the last 14 years, and he's currently on the board of directors of Homeward. These days, Josh is specifically excited about the link between local agriculture and local culture, and the potential of urban agriculture to address sustainability issues as well as social problems. So why don't we welcome Josh?
Thanks, Matthew, for inviting me and for hosting this series yet again. So I just have 15 minutes, and for those of you who know me, I could just do 15 minutes of introduction and it's done. So I'm going to try and keep it crisp and short. I want to talk first about our current food system and why it's not that great, and then offer a very brief vision of what it could be. And I'm skipping all the steps on how we get from where we are to where we could be, because then it would be a 90-minute thing, and maybe that'll be food for some questions later. So first, about our current food system. We're in October now, right? October. Any one of us could run out the door, head off to Walmart or Safeway or Albertsons or any big store you want and buy strawberries, pears, peaches, asparagus. You could buy anything you want. You can even wait till 3 in the morning and go buy strawberries at Walmart. I mean, that's a butt-kicking food system, isn't it? This food system can do everything. We are so well fed in America, we're fat. 40% of us are obese. And we pay less for our food per capita than any other nationality, any other group of people in the whole globe. And we pay less for our food than anyone ever has at any time during human history. It's super cheap, and you can get anything, anytime, anywhere you want. So how could I dare say anything is even wrong with this system? I mean, somebody, I didn't know most of these people, none of them are thinking this, but somebody could very well say, what do you mean? We're so well fed, we're fat. It doesn't cost any money. What's the problem? This is a great food system, right? Well, it's great at delivering food from anywhere at any time and keeping the price really cheap at the till. But it's really terrible for local ecologies, local economies, and local cultures. And I'll try and unpack these things. I'm going to try and stick hard to my 15 minutes. So we'll do ecologies first. And I'm going to divide this up into urban areas and out in the countryside. We'll think about eastern Montana. Urban areas, we'll think about Missoula. So in the recent past, anybody lived here long enough, you guys, to see where has development occurred? Where have we seen mad new growth over the last 5 years, 10 years? Has it been in the city? Steve, I might have to ask you to answer this question. It's not in the city. We've had some infill in the city, but the mad new growth has been in the county, outside of city limits. If you go out by where I live, west of Reserve Street, the area is smeared with these new McMansions. Head down Reserve Street, which 10 years ago was pasture, it's now the Costco Valley, filled with that litany of box stores that you see in every city that's our size. So before the tract housing, before the strip malls and the big boxes, there was agriculture. Now, if we think about, I'm on ecology right now, thinking about what is the measure of ecological health, a really common measure is biodiversity. Is that right? Can I say that? Some confidence. The biodiversity in the cow pasture, even though it's a cow pasture, is much greater than the biodiversity of the parking lot. Far greater than the biodiversity in the sterile lawns of modern suburbs. That's an easy one, ecology. So that's in the urban area. When we lost these little ring of farmland that was like a donut around Missoula, we lost a piece of ecology. Think about it in the countryside. There used to be a lot of people living out in the country farming. Now the average farm size is like 3,000 acres, which means there aren't very many people living in eastern Montana. And those farms that had once been very diverse are now very undiverse, growing mostly wheat. Think about this from an ecological perspective. If your farm has got 4 or 5 or 6 crops and animals and a kitchen garden, that's pretty diverse compared to 3,000, 4,000 acres of wheat. So the modern food system, which relies on these big commodity crops out in eastern Montana, has reduced the ecological health of the countryside. In the urban area, where we once had little farms, now they've been displaced. What were they displaced by? Remember, this is a quiz. So what were they displaced by? Lawns and parking lots, right? And they went away because we didn't need them anymore. We could get food cheap from somewhere else, and that's the big food system. That same food system that provides us cheap food from somewhere else made those little farms ringing our town irrelevant. And they made those little diverse 360-acre farms in eastern Montana, they made them irrelevant as well. The only way those eastern Montana farms could exist is if they got really big. In fact, the watchword, this is a phrase, came from Earl Butz in the early 1970s, who was the Secretary of Agriculture. Get big or get out. Those are the options for farmers, for grain farmers. The options for vegetable farmers close to a city, used to be called truck farming. The option is to sell your real estate, because that's where your money is. And in both cases, the ecological health went down. So I don't want to eat up my 15 minutes on this. I better go fast. So economy, the big food system, the big giant globalized food system, bad for local economies. It's the same set of examples again. If you were to go out to the North Reserve Strip, that used to be small farms, out in my part of town that used to be small farms, and it's now just big houses, and you want to spend some money, well, you're spending the money out on the Strip, where does that money go? I mean, quick as an email, it goes to Target headquarters in Minneapolis, right? It's not being recirculated in our economy. Those commercial entities don't care about Missoula. If things got a little weak here, they'd close up shop and go somewhere else. This large food system doesn't do anything for our local economy. It does a lot for the people who manage it and own it. I'm jumping to culture, going quickly. Using the same examples. If you drive down North Reserve and see those stores that have displaced small farms, or if you go out into near Big Sandy, or up where I'm going to go near Stanford, just a few weeks, You see towns that are drying up and dying. If you drive the High Line or take the train across the High Line across northeastern Montana, you'll see more empty homesteads than functioning ones. These all went away because this large food system made them irrelevant. The globalized food system made farms, small farms, irrelevant. So the farms went away. They got big or they got out. Most of them got out. So what happened to those little towns? They dried up and went away. What do we lose when we lose those towns? We lost real cultures, authentic cultures, not cultures that are like the ones out on Reserve Street. They can be anywhere and are plastic and mean nothing and exist only to let you know you're incomplete and ask for your money. But real cultures, those cultures are gone. There is no more big sandy Montana the way there used to be. It's just a shell of its former self. And that's due to this large food system that made those farms irrelevant. When the farms became irrelevant, the people left. The same thing happened on these farms I'm talking about that ring Missoula, that used to ring Missoula. You go to the area I keep mentioning, and unless you lift your eyes over the built horizon, you could be anywhere. That strip looks like anywhere. The new houses out by my house, they can be anywhere. What used to be there, the farming, was an activity that could only exist by the parameters of this place. Nothing could be more endemic and specific and particular than agriculture. That kind of agriculture. And it was replaced by something that was just the opposite. It wasn't specific and particular endemic. It's homogeneous and everywhere and thoroughly soulless. So there's my brief indictment of the food system, right? It's damaged our local economy, our local ecology, and our local culture. Local, whether you're in Missoula or Big Sandy. It's not good for any of those three things. So with quickly glossing over the steps to get to a better vision, I'll just outline a quick vision, and then we'll jump to these next ones. So in the urban area, right in Missoula, what would I love to see it look like? I'll just use me because Matt asked me to do this. I'd love to see Missoula look a lot more like Havana. And that's not just because of the salsa music or all the pork, but in Havana, every couple blocks, I saw a little mini farm. Farms like Steve and I were just talking about, using raised beds. So you got an asphalt lot, and then have raised beds, 6 of them going 300 feet long, and people growing food there. Every open space, when it was the front yard of the police station, the side yard of the hospital, the backyard of a school, all these places were using their open space to grow food. And this food feeds the city. And it feeds the city more than just nutritionally. It makes it beautiful. It also is a focal place, a center place for neighborliness. It makes people care about where they live if it looks beautiful, and it gives them something back. It's the medium for people to getting to know each other, civility. So there's the urban core. Here in the urban core, we have a lot more mini farms or large gardens that are communal and that anybody nearby can use a plot. And I would say we make use of all public open space, whether that's the side yard of the school, the hospital, the police station, whatever. Think how beautiful it would look too. And the reduction in vehicle miles traveled, in CO2 in the atmosphere, in road rage. There's the urban core. We go outside of the urban area. What do? We bring back some more of those small farms. Right now, this land out by where I live is worth so much money. I was just talking to a landowner the other day, $100,000 an acre. You guys are quiet, huh? Nobody's even going, wow, that's fucking amazing. No, that's amazing. $100,000 an acre. So there's no way you could ever farm there, right? Not at those prices. Well, in my grand vision, we work with developers and builders, and instead of saying this is the zoning or this is the law and how it would be, we set up some values and give them more density. It means they can build more houses if they perform according to our values. Okay, so you want to buy this 10 acres and develop it? If you save 75%, we'll increase the amount of density you can have on the rest of it. So you can make some money, build some houses, but here's an incentive, not a disincentive, not the stick, but the carrot to save more ag land. And on this saved land, we have small farms that sell to local stores. There's my little vision for that. Now, out in the countryside, the vision for the countryside is decommodify agriculture. Commodities, rather than foods, are subsidized heavily by our government. And this is a good idea in one sense because it keeps the price of wheat really low, right? Which means we can enjoy cheap pastry. Really what it means is that farmers don't make anything and they're allowed to skate by on subsidies, and the companies that sell them inputs are able to funnel that money off. A good friend of mine who used to be a conventional grain grower and is now an organic grower said that when he looked at it real hard, he realized his subsidy check and his chemical bill per acre were about the same. So where did the subsidy go? Anyway, what I would love to see happen is no one farm 3,000 acres of one thing. And really try hard to come up with ways to figure out how somebody living out in the middle of eastern Montana could earn a living on 350 acres. And then instead of barely anybody living out there, we have enough people to have a cafe and a church and a real school and all the other accoutrements of a small town. I think I got my vision there.
All right.
Am I right? Am I right, Don?
You're good?
I'm good. Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, Larry Evans is a widely known mushroom expert who has collected mushrooms and taught seminars around the U.S. and internationally. He is Montana's first certified wild mushroom vendor and founder of the Western Montana Mycological Association, a federally recognized educational nonprofit. Please welcome the morel maniac, Larry Evans.
Hey. How do I get to start? Sorry. Okay, I guess my vision's a little bit different from Josh's. I don't have any place to start because there isn't any sort of existing American mushroom culture or mushroom society or mushroom even awareness. Okay, so what my vision is more like a shopping list, and that is how we can use these members of the Fifth Kingdom to support the types of nutritional and lifestyle sorts of things that we want to do. There's three main ways that I'd like to, a part of this that I'd like to look at. One is non-timber forest products. Okay, that is using the existing products inside our native forests in a way that they can produce income without having to go and unsustainably harvest or post-fire harvest trees or do other types of, do other sorts of timber management. Cattle grazing and logging come to mind pretty fast. Ways to keep the forests intact, maintain the watersheds, and keep the other aspects of the living forest working so that the living forest is truly as valuable as the dead forest. The second aspect of it is how to use mushrooms in terms of recycling carbon, okay? Right now, one of the main issues that we have is a lot of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere, okay? One of the big reasons that we have a lot of this is because of combustion. People have, I'm down in Brazil, people are burning huge piles of banana bagasse. They're burning huge piles of cane sugar bagasse. High nitrogen, easily digested stuff. This can all be turned into high protein food, and they put a match to it, okay? Gosh, that's stupid. But then I look around here, what do as soon as we cut down a forest? We pile up the branches, put a match to it, okay? Where does that energy go? I mean, is anybody cooking hot dogs out here? You know, this is not the way to deal with organic waste. This is so far away from what we need to be doing that I'm just so glad to come here so that I can vent with you people. We need to be taking all this organic matter, getting it wet, and burying it with a bunch of inoculated culture. Then this same stuff, instead of going up in smoke and getting in your eyes and making you cough and everything else, you're creating, you're naturally recycling the carbon, you're making use of the energy stored in reduced carbon, and you're also liberating nutrients that can actually be utilized in a native system much more easily, okay? So there's two. The third aspect that I'm really looking at in terms of just the first one is, again, non-timber forest products, and then looking at carbon cycling. The next thing is a food source, which kind of ties in with all this. We have, I'll show you a few species here that we have locally that are already used for food sources, that are already commercial products, and many that might be cultivated. And the fourth aspect of all this is bioremediation, and how we can use fungi to break down toxic wastes, to recycle, again, all the various excess carbon, agricultural waste and stuff that we have, and produce useful medicines, reduce our use of chemicals for biopulping, okay? Mushrooms can be used to take wood that's ready to be pulped, for example, for stone container. You chip it, you inoculate it with a fungus. The fungus eats the lignin. It eats the stuff that holds the wood together, the lignin that glues those cellulose fibers together. They spend all these tons and tons of sulfate and tons of sodium hydroxide that are used in the craft process to remove the lignin from this and separate it from the cellulose. You can do this with a biological process. In 21 days, you can process virtually all the lignin out of this. You reduce the volume by 2/5, you reduce the need for chemicals, the sulfate and hydroxide by tremendous degrees. You reduce the amount of trucks that you need to ship the stuff from one place to the other. And it goes on and on and on. Okay, so there's a number of ways that we can use these types of fungi in industrial processes as well. Another thing that leaps to mind, shakes my cage every day. Mushrooms break down chlorinated biphenyls. They break down pentachlor. They break down chlorinated hydrocarbons in diesel fuel, for Christ's sake. I mean, there's just about nothing out there that is such a horrible problem that if you don't put it into, if you can put it in a context where you've got functioning mushroom ecosystem, it will be able to break that down. Mushrooms do this not by absorbing the poisons, but they actually secrete enzymes that create peroxidase. And they digest these things outside the cell, and then they take this stuff back inside and metabolize it, okay? In this way, you can change chlorinated hydrocarbons into nothing more than usable reduced carbon and hydrochloric acid gas, okay? So, another thing that mushrooms break down that's been almost scandalous because they're members of the genus Psilocybe is that they can break down VX nerve gas and sarin, some of the most deadly bioweapons that we have. They're going to all this trouble to build this millions of dollar incinerator in Utah, which is already proven that it won't work. We already know that you can't get the stuff hot enough to actually do it. So basically they're getting it hot and casting it over large portions of the West. The darn stuff is broken down in a simple process with no added heat, in the dark, in the cool, by fungi, poison gas in, usable organic phosphates out, okay? So the technology exists in a huge way. I mean, the science is already here. What we lack is any sort of social or cultural appreciation for how these types of organisms can be used in a realistic way. We simply don't have the background. You go to Europe, you find people who are conversant in mycological materials. They know the Latin names of all the mushrooms. I go out in the wilds of Italy talking to people who've never met an American before. We're talking Latin names. They know all the Latin names of the fungi, so we can sit there and compare this. People ask me, what's a common name? I can't give you a common name. They're not, people don't even know what the Latin name is. You know, we don't have a starting place. So my rant at this point is basically to try and inspire you to think of the potential of the possibilities that we have. I've got a journal here about mushroom types of information, if they're free, if you want to grab one. We're going to have a mushroom hunt October 15th at the Symes Hotel. You're all welcome to attend. It's very reasonable. You can find lodging yourself. And the next thing I want to do is try and run through some of these pictures and address, how much more time do I have?
5 minutes.
Okay, and run through some of these species and try and give you just a thumbnail, just a dirt under the thumbnail type of description of what these things can be used for, and I have no idea how to make this.
You need a mushroom there.
Yeah, put a mushroom on it.
There.
Oh, that. Oh, okay, so let's go back. I'm sorry. All right, the first one that we're looking at here, I'm not looking at it at all. I can't even see anything on there, can you? Can you see these things?
Yeah.
Yeah, they look like a big ear, kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the tree ear. This grows on our native fir. This is another reason why, in terms of forest policy, I want to shake people's cage and get them to rethink. That grows exclusively on true fir. True fir is being selectively wiped out throughout the Intermountain West because it doesn't produce good timber. But this same fir, the true firs, are vitally important to a wide range of fungi, including almost all the commercially important edibles. So what are we doing? We're removing the value of our native forests by removing some of the key players. We're still maintaining a plantation. We can still get the wood out, but we're eliminating fungi like this. This is the tree ear. This goes for about $2 an ounce if you buy it in a Chinese market. It's something that you'll find commonly in ramen and noodle soup. I harvest dozens of pounds of it a year without even thinking about it, you know. It's certainly a commodity that we could be looking at, and we're not. Another one that is pretty well known is the Boletus, the Boletus edulis, the king bolete. These are not very common in Montana, but the places that they are invariably old growth and big diameter trees. They're in choice ecosystem in areas that probably shouldn't be logged, and at a minimum of $15 a pound, these things provide another valuation for these older forests. Okay, here's this is Clavariadelphis truncatus. Okay, the sweet stick mushroom. It grows in moss beds. It's no bigger than your finger probably, but this mushroom is incredibly sweet. It has a protein, and as far as I know, it's still never been analyzed. It's as sweet as saccharin. It's sweeter than stevia, and yet it only grows in moss beds in the old growth. And as far as I know, there's nobody but a few mushroom freaks who cook it up and put it on their ice cream that even use this stuff. Next one. Here we've got some Agaricus oceanus growing in a cow pasture. We have Agaricus around the city, around this area. We have Agaricus mushrooms that farmers brought in the last century, in the 1800s, that have escaped, and they're still growing in people's compost piles in Missoula. We've got these perfectly good edibles are growing out in the Wallace Ranch, and gosh, we went out there on a field trip, found like 50 pounds of these rascals in, minutes. But yeah, it's just it doesn't take any special consideration. It takes a little bit of knowledge, and it's very easy to propagate this. If you have a pasture land, this is a very natural thing. Like I say, they've escaped from cultivation in the last century, and they're still here. Here's another one. This is an interesting concept. We have, of all the cultivated, think about this, of all the cultivated mushrooms in the world, virtually none of them are grown on conifer. All these that I'm showing you grow on conifer. These are all candidates for cultivation. All of these are mushrooms that have a tremendous ability to turn one of the most abundant products in the Pacific Northwest into edible food. This is Pleurotus pulmonarius, a type of oyster mushroom that only grows on conifers. Next. Here's another oyster mushroom that is grown on birch. These are, we have a number of oyster mushrooms around the Pleurotus genus. They're cultivated pretty widely, and they can be propagated. Next. Next. Isn't there a sequence on the... That's it. No. Well, we didn't get that sequence. That's okay. But we do, if you happen to visit the website, you'll see that we've got a series of workshops that we've done to try and propagate oyster mushrooms in their native environment, in cottonwood stands, in riparian areas. And the idea of this is that you can get up to 100 pounds an acre of oyster mushrooms growing off of logs, cottonwood logs. This is, if you can exclude cattle from this area, you could hope to gain an income equivalent to the amount that's required to try and fence that off and exclude that from cattle. $100 an acre. Show me a place you can run a cow and make $100 an acre, please. Please. Okay? So this is another one. This grows, are you ready for this? This grows on knapweed straw. Huh. Wow, where does that take your imagination, huh? Look at the size of this thing. This mushroom is almost life size. These mushrooms, these clusters actually get 10, 15 pounds. Okay? This is the fried chicken mushroom, Lyophilum decastus. And this is a completely ignored but common native edible. We do have people here who pick it, but the potential for commercially propagating this, especially if you're looking at someplace like old log yards, okay? I mean, find me a log deck somewhere, please. There must be one somewhere in western Montana, okay? Someplace, for example, maybe with sawdust that's 20 or 30 feet thick. Does this sound familiar yet? Okay. And then when we inoculate with this, we get heroic fruitings of this mushroom that come on for decades. This has been coming on since the 60s, okay? We've also got, there's a park in town. A few years back, I threw my mushroom scraps on a huge pile of leaves that they had. They took it, and now throughout the entire park, there's mushroom clumps coming up all over the place because they got more food than they know what to do with. And nobody picks them. Nobody knows what they are. You know, I'm safe. Got the whole kingdom here. Okay? Next one. This is another one that I just get a little excited about, raises my blood pressure occasionally. This is Lentinus ponderosus. It grows on ponderosa pine. How about that? And look at the size of that little feller. This is related to the shiitake. Okay, maybe you've heard of the Japanese shiitake mushroom that is the little brown mushroom that's popular in stores now. That's grown on alder chips. Here's its relative here in our native Montana setting, and it grows on ponderosa pine. Okay, nobody's growing this. Nobody's using this at all. And a longitude. I don't know why that's even in here. So that's probably good, huh? Yeah, really, that's all the pictures. Okay, so hopefully, you know, there's a little bit of information. I really have not even skimmed the surface. You know, we got a whole kingdom here. We got over 5,000 species between here and the coast. You've seen maybe 4 or 5. We have maybe a couple hundred, 400 or 500 on the website. The potential out here is absolutely mind-boggling. And as I just was at Skeeter's permaculture course up in Hot Springs, we had a day there on how to incorporate fungi into a permaculture garden. How do you work this in? Because let's face it, if you're going to be growing something, you know, you're going to have ag waste. You know, if you don't have some sort of recycler that's on your side that maybe provides you with food or medicine or some sort of prophylaxis in your plant growing operation, then you have food for pathogens. You have food for invasive types of fungi, trichodermas, and disease-causing agents even as well. So we don't have it in our mind to manage waste and recycling. And I think we should. That's all.
Missoula Urban Demonstration Project began as the Down Home Project in 1978, the same year that Lou Ann Crowley moved to Montana. Luann became the director of MUD in May and has come to realize that MUD and her have a similar vision for Missoula, and that's creating an engaged community of empowered and aware individuals enjoying sustainable living through both community interdependence and self-reliance. MUD fosters these sustainable living practices by providing a tool library, educational and outreach programs, and a community-focused demonstration site to residents of the Missoula urban area. Please welcome Luann Crowley.
Now, doesn't that sound nice? We foster this and that. We do nice things. But after you hear the history of this place, you realize that we're just as much of a rant as these two guys. And I think Steve will prove me out as well. We want sustainable to be normal. Sustainable's not normal right now. If you went to Harvest Fest, it was all very nice, but there should have been 10,000 people there. We should have a week-long Harvest Fest. This lady from Bellingham came a couple of weeks ago. She's the beginning of the revolution, as far as I can see, because they're making local normal. Buy local, support local. We want sustainable to be normal. But of course, everything happens. What's the saying? Necessity, invention. Necessity is the mother and father of invention. Back in the 80s, it really wasn't that great. Well, I love living here in the 80s, but it was a downtime in Missoula. All right? You look around Missoula today, I don't know how many of you have lived here that long, but it was tough times. Downtown, some of the stores were closed. We certainly didn't have Reserve Street. It was a much simpler time. And over on the north side, how many of you actually know where MUD is? Oh, great.
Wrong audience.
Great. All right. That. No. 80s, downtime. This guy, your age, early 20s, he's known as Wild Willie. He's got Wild Willie's Chicken Farm. He has a little plot of land on the north side. And he realizes he better start growing his own food because times are tough. And some of his friends start coming over. And they say, their thing is, people better get down home and learn how to take care of themselves. And that's where the Down Home Project came from. And pretty soon, the two pieces of property next to it became available. And a number of people moved in. We could call it a collective, a commune. They cleaned the place up and they started gardening. And they started reaching out to people to say, hey, you know, if you learn how to garden, grow your own food, you'll be one step ahead of what's going on. And they started this business called Garden City Seeds. And when I said I got here in '78, I remember going over there. There are two entrances, as you know, and you could go into the first one. And on your honor system, you could go in, pick up your seeds, and just throw the money in the box. And that just felt really good to me. I remember feeling how nice that felt. And that's what I love. Because the MUD is separated by the railroad tracks, it retains some of that feeling of 25 years ago, funky and laid back. But it's a fantastic neighborhood. So in the 80s, they were trying to reach out and educate people about how to take care of themselves and not be dependent on the system. In the 90s, Head Start came to them. Head Start's right down the street, and they came to them and they said, would you do some classes for our kids? And that was the beginning of the first community garden in Missoula. It eventually was turned over to Garden City Harvest, but that one got started at MUD. Also in the 90s, you know, I got to tell you, reading the history, which I really didn't do until I was preparing for this speech, I realized it has had a very checkered past, ups and downs, and it's only taken the will and the love and the heart of the people who are connected with that organization to keep it going. So in the 90s, one of the board members reached out to the EVST program here at the university, and it started to involve the students. And one of the wonderful things, well, it's an up and down thing with MUD, we have a strategic plan, but the plan is whoever's there makes the plan. Whoever's there and has an idea, that's what happens. And that's what's been happening at MUD for 25 years, and it's been great. We've got people like Matt Heisel in the audience. He came over there as an intern, worked at MUD, created that solar greenhouse that heats the tool library, and he went on to create Home Resource. It's an incubator. It grows things. It's a mushroom. It grows things. In 2000, again, MUD reached out to the neighborhood and found out through the neighborhood council that they wanted a tool library. So a tool library was created in somebody's garage and eventually moved over to the MUD site. This tool library is wonderful because as I sit in my office, I can see a woman carrying a trowel. She's carrying a trowel back to the library. She went back to her house, got the trowel, dug up what she wanted, and then brought the trowel back. Or somebody's on his bike and he's pulling the lawnmower behind his bike to take home to mow his lawn. So in the 90s, when the students came, they felt they wanted to go a different direction, and they changed it to the Missoula Urban Demonstration Project. You know, you're talking, what's the vision for an urban city? It's always been, how can we live sustainably in an urban setting? And also then in the beginning in 2000, there was this desire to reach out beyond. It isn't just a north side entity. Sustainability is for the whole community. Now, once you become a member of MUD, all of a sudden, you have a whole garage full of tools. I mean, over 800 tools. How many thousands of dollars worth of tools? Doesn't it make sense? So we want to take tool libraries around town. At the Harvest Fest this weekend, that community over by the airport, they call them the Whoville. They said, we'd like to have a tool library because they live so closely, they borrow from each other. You have an apple press. You have a pickup truck. You know, one of my dreams going there, and this is a program all over the country, these flex cars at universities, in cities. You see them in San Francisco. They're very attractive in San Francisco. We wanted to have one, and what do you know? Last week, a woman donated a 1991 pickup truck to MUD. We're going to put it in the tool library, and when people need to borrow a truck for anything, camping, hauling, they're going to be able to borrow that truck. I mean, that's the way you start moving out and getting connections. Okay. Another program we have that actually brought quite a nice little honorable mention to Missoula in the July issue of the Sierra Club's magazine is our Coffee to Compost. Now again, that was started by local people who said, look at this, look at all this stuff that's just going to waste. Young people come over, get on that bike with 2 30-gallon drums, and they go to Bernice's, or they go to La Petite, they go to Warden's. They have collected, over the past 5 to 6 years, almost 29,000 gallons of coffee grounds and eggshells. A lot of eggshells, because I've been picking it up too. And that goes to community gardens, to use for compost, to go back into the earth. We're a demonstration site. We have this wonderful, the garden has been the heart and soul of this organization, and it continues to be. We do workshops on start to finish gardening. We do workshops on basic drywall, wiring, tools for women. This is about learning how to take care of yourself, but in the context of learning how to do it with everybody else. So you're standing in line at the tool library, and you start talking to the guy behind you, and pretty soon you're working on the same project, or you're teaching each other how to do something. Just the other day, Big Sky Brewery, this is a dream come true for MUD. Big Sky Brewery came in and helped us dig a trench to connect the wiring from the tool library to what used to be our solar greenhouse. A volunteer went in there last autumn, and he put a wood floor in there, and he said, I want this to be a workspace. So now, not only can you take the tool, but you can go into the workspace where there are drills and saws, and you can make a bookcase, you can make a chair. I think it's just great. So, you know, we're kind of from the earth up. Whatever it takes to live, what's the most efficient, sustainable way to do that? Over the years, maybe I mentioned it, we've helped start Garden City, maybe got home resources going. We're kind of an incubator. And I can't, just since May, people are calling me up saying, you know, I know you compost coffee grounds. I want to start composting all the food waste from around town. I've already got the bins, and I've already talked to Missoula Valley Recycling. Let's get food composting going around Missoula. I worked at Tour de Fat. Our job as MUD was to monitor the recycling bins, because it's amazing after you've had a few beers, when you come up and you see the signs, you're not quite sure where that goes. Or how many people said to me, young people, old people, how come Missoula doesn't recycle glass? We were so close to getting our own crusher. And the kids at the university back 5, 10 years ago, they were so into it. It's not happening right now. I'd love it if we could get a group together and say, let's go to the legislature. Let's do something to get recycling going. When I think about the future, I want to see a sustainability summit here in Missoula. I want to say, okay, what's the vision? What's it going to take? And who's going to do it? Because it's not like it's hard work. It may be hard work, but it's fun to think in those terms. Because to me, vision means seeing what we always see, but with different eyes. You know, you say see, but do we really see? Do we really hear? It's all around us. I see MUD as a gathering place for ideas. There are so many good ideas and so many people who have them. It's percolating. And it wants to get together. It wants to say, hey, you can tell we want to change. We want to change. We want to go back. There are 600 members of MUD that have that one similar desire in their heart to see us respect the earth, to be part of the circle. Right now, most of us, our society doesn't live within the circle. We're trying to go out. But we're in an ecosystem. And there's nothing wrong with behaving like that. I'd love to see a sustainable toolkit for businesses. Businesses are the ones that are going to take us into the future. We need to support our local business, help them become sustainable, and then applaud them for that. Let's take back our town in that sense. You were talking about it. You were talking about it. Bellingham did it. And the Sustainable Business Council is going to make it happen, and I'm going to make it happen, because that seems to be, you know, we've got think green, keep it wild, support organic farmers, but we have to go a lot further than that. So I'll tell you what, you all know where we are, so please come visit. And start thinking in those terms, that organic farming or what Larry's doing, it's not fringe. It's time that we make that the norm. Thank you.
Quick question, directions, because I actually don't know where you are.
Okay, directions.
Go down Turner and turn down Holmes Street.
That's one way. If you're on your, yeah, that's good. If you're on your bike, we're by the bike pedestrian bridge, we're like a block and a half west of the bike. We're right against the railroad tracks, actually, and then if you're coming by car, you go under the Orange Street bridges if you're getting onto the highway, and just before, right after the Conoco station, take 3rd, go right down to Head Start, take a left and then a quick right onto Phillips. It's 629 Phillips. Our website is mudproject.org.
All right, our final speaker tonight is Steve Loken. Steve is president of Loken Builders, an energy-efficient construction company here in Missoula. He is a member of the Governor's Global Warming Advisory Task Force, the Missoula Global Greenhouse Advisory Commission, the Northwest Eco Building Guild, and the Missoula Sustainable Business Council, which Luann just mentioned. He's also director for green building for the National Audubon Society. Steve lectures and builds and educates professionals on all aspects of energy and sustainable building practices, including ecological landscaping, salvage and reuse, renovation of buildings, and restoration of land. Tonight he's representing AERO, which stands for Alternative Energy Resource Organization. He's a former board member of that organization and a current member. And they are a Montana nonprofit that is committed to the education and implementation of alternative energy and agriculture systems in Montana. Welcome, Steve Loken.
Up and see what you guys want to envision for the future. But I didn't bring any slides because I'm not really good at digital imagery. And I'm here mostly to let you guys think about what the visions were, are. 1972, Tom Judge was the governor then, and he had a summit in Helena. About 800 people showed up. And if we had heard the word sustainable, we probably would have used it. But at that time, it was appropriate. And in all sectors of Montana's economy, agriculture, transportation, housing, energy, we had incredible people in the state talking about what they wanted to see happen in Montana 30 years, 40 years, 50 years ahead, what this state was going to look like. And Tom Judge, in his wisdom and foresight and environmental prowess at the time, decided to have two speakers, keynote speakers at this conference in Helena. Still blows me away that they were there and that I was there listening to these people. But he had E.F. Schumacher, who wrote Small is Beautiful. Anybody read that book? It's a powerful book about exactly what they've been talking about. E.F. Schumacher was there talking about small, local, decentralized, we can make it happen. And they had a debate with E.F. Schumacher and Malcolm Forbes.
Oh my God.
Malcolm Forbes, Forbes magazine, Fortune 500. This guy's big. He had a huge ranch here in Montana, which later became the Church of the Universal Triumphant over by Yellowstone. But this guy was a powerful, powerful captain of industry. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because as you envision what Montana can be 30 years from now, because it's going to be a slow process to get there, I want you to think about big versus small and how we can make this work, because we're still struggling to make this work. And today, the front page of the Missoulian said not just one, but 2 new coal plants are being promoted by our Democratic governor. And I personally feel like I'm short-circuited. I'm on his Global Warming Advisory Task Force, and he didn't ask any of us advice as to whether or not we should have yet another giant coal-burning plant in this state. So I wanted to kind of cover a few of the things that they haven't covered here. And that is energy, because all of this is about energy, I believe. Ultimately, it is all about energy, whether it's food, transportation, buildings, clothing, you name it, it's about energy and how we get it and what our carbon footprint is on the planet as we try to get it. And the other is transportation and housing, which I'll talk a little bit about. But first of all, when it comes to energy, this state hasn't done really great with its energy footprint, its carbon footprint, because we have these vast reserves of coal. They're huge. We're the Saudi Arabia of North America with coal deposits. It's good coal. It's really good coal. It doesn't have much sulfur in it. It burns really hot. And it happens to be underneath some marginal and good agricultural land, which only limitation is water. And that water happens to be regenerated, cleaned, and provided by an aquifer that is coal. So we can choose a future here. We can sell the coal And we may have to. We may have to contribute to selling coal, or we burn it in the state. But that's a choice you guys, as voters and as citizens in this state, will have to decide. Is agriculture and water important, or is selling coal to the rest of the nation so they continue their ways of just simply burning it up more important? Or can this state actually be a leader in conservation technology? Can this state be a leader in saying, nah, we're going to keep our coal for a while. You can take Wyoming's coal because they're dumb bunnies down there. They're letting it go. They're bending over backwards. They're letting it go. But that's Wyoming. This is Montana. Now, I think we're smarter than them. I really do. I think Montanans should bring the coal severance tax back up to 28%. It was 28% for a few years in this state, and man, oh man, did we get revenues when we had that coal severance tax. If you're going to take our coal, then you take it on our terms. This is my vision of the future. Tax them. Because guess what's happened? What's happened is the legislature, in their wisdom, has dropped the coal severance tax over the years down to 12% now. And that 12% coal severance tax has done what? It's allowed coal companies to mine more coal faster, ship it out quicker, make more money, and employ less Montanans than ever before. That's what it's done. Now, this next session, we could bring the coal severance tax back up to 28%, and it will lower it. We'll lower it for every 500 jobs you give us in the coal industry, we'll drop it 1%. So we get something back. And if they can't provide the jobs, then we keep it at 28%, because frankly, none of these visions is going to work in this state unless we have the revenue to do it. We have the revenue to lead the country in how to conserve, how to use fossil fuels and non-renewable energy sources smarter. Great Falls could be, instead of a coal generating plant, it could be the leader in wind technology in the nation. It's the third windiest city in the United States. Why can't we lead the nation in wind production for electrical energy? So getting to energy, coal's the big one. We've got coal bed methane, and there's some technologies now that will allow us to possibly get methane out, coal out cleaner. But let's have the state lead the nation in how to do this. Wyoming is doing it all wrong. They're totally screwing up Wyoming. We don't have to follow the lowest denominator. And it's up to us, I believe, to understand how we can do this smarter and then do it. But the revenues need to be there for us to get smart, to attract people here that will help us get there. And we need leadership and we need vision to get there. So wind is one of them. Yeah, it's mercurial. It goes up and down. We also could lead the nation in better storage technologies, electron storage systems. So we don't have to burn coal, lots of coal, to meet the peak at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We can have electron storage systems that are smarter. We also can decentralize energy production in this state and have cellulosic ethanol, not corn-based ethanol, but cellulosic ethanol. Arrow is promoting things like this because we believe that our agricultural future in the state's important, that farmers and ranchers ought to be able to make some money doing what they're doing, and their waste cellulosic material could be making ethanol, very small amounts. But then maybe we need to make smaller amounts of everything. Maybe E.F. Schumacher was right. Maybe Malcolm Forbes was wrong. Because the capital involved in building that one coal plant in Great Falls is going to be $500 million. The plant that they're talking about, Synfuels over by Roundup, that's $1.5 billion. Well, where do you get that kind of money? It's not just sitting around. And what this does is it burns coal conventionally, produces electricity conventionally, and already this state is exporting 50% more electrical energy to the nation than we consume. We're doing our share. Our carbon footprint is huge. I believe that if we look to the future, we can make that carbon footprint smaller for lots of obvious reasons. One of the most important ones is right now California and Arizona legislature just passed laws that say that they will import no energy into their states that produces a carbon footprint. So here's Montana with all these coal plants kicking away, thinking we're going to export it to California and make wazoo bucks. It ain't going to happen. because those states are realizing carbon footprint, global warming are important, and they may choose not, as their legislatures have just done, to not even want our coal-produced electricity. So we have to get smarter about how we're going to burn this stuff. We have a lot of sunshine in this state, and I know this sounds old. This is like the energy bozo from 30 years ago talking about passive solar. You know, it really does work. It really does, and it is free. We do build solar homes, and there's a lot of them in Montana. There should be a lot more, not just McMansions looking cute for a great view, but incorporating some solar in those houses so that you can have them heat in the wintertime, and actually, if they're designed right, stay cooler in the summertime with the same kind of designs. But I guess I saved this one till last so I could try to get the biggest punch. It's not fuel cells, it's not hydrogen, it's not more wind generators, it's not more coal. It's simply less. How do you have an economy with people that are making the second lowest per capita income in the state? Don't forget, that's us, okay? The second lowest per capita income in the United States. How are we expected to continue to pay more and more for energy and pay the global liability of producing it conventionally? I just don't think we can. I don't think we can afford it, and I don't think the state should be providing it. So this state could be a leader in conservation. I know this is boring. Nobody wants to conserve anything. But when you don't have much, you can't get much, and you don't have credit that you can borrow on the future, guess what? Nature doesn't have credit. Nature can't borrow on the future. So what makes we think that we can do this? So frugality, conservation, and living a little bit lighter on the land is probably the absolute cheapest and smartest way to go. And we could set up systems in this state tomorrow that could do this. Transportation, after coal combustion in this state, transportation is the second largest carbon footprint this state has. Cars, trucks. And tomorrow, the state legislature, if it were meeting, could come up with a fee-based system. A fee-based system lets Detroit produce anything they want. Hummers, small cars, Priuses, whatever they want. A fee-based program that's within the Department of Transportation simply says that if you want a Hummer, you can buy one, but at registration, a new Hummer is going to cost you $25,000 to register in this state. No problem. They pay it. But if you want to buy a Prius, you get a $10,000 credit upon registration. So it could even be a generating mechanism in the state to make money for the state. It could be fee neutral. It could be revenue neutral. But we need to encourage low carbon footprint vehicles, and we need to discourage high carbon footprint vehicles. Maybe we need to phase it in over 5 years, and agriculture and transportation are exempt for a while until diesel technologies get smarter and trucks get smaller. But this you can do. We need to have policies in place that will encourage and discourage carrots and sticks. And when it comes to other financing mechanisms for this, I'd like to throw this out because I've been thinking about this for a long time. And I think the tenor is changing. But you have to understand this state does not have revenues. It's barely squeaking by. We don't have the best and the brightest in this state because we can't pay to keep them here. And the cost of living here is very expensive. Those are realities. So how do we change this picture? Well, the second largest economic sector in this state after agriculture is tourism. They come here in droves. I was just in Yellowstone last weekend. The place is packed in October with people speaking all languages in the world, all license plates across the United States. They come here conditioned to and expecting to pay a sales tax. And we don't ask them. They're dumbfounded. We don't ask them. Now, most of my friends are less prone to freaking out about a sales tax, but I just don't think it's fair that you work your whole life in this state, you work hard, you retire, and you don't consume much when you're retired because you're fixed income, and you have to pay $3,000 and $4,000 a year to live in your own home? That's just wrong. That's just wrong. Meanwhile, you know, upwardly mobile tourists who make more money from around the state, around the nation, come in here and we don't even ask. So I'm suggesting lower property taxes commensurate with a sales tax. And as citizens in the state, necessities are not taxed. But other things that tourists buy can be taxed. It would raise revenues in the state to do a lot of leadership things in energy, transportation, wind, all kinds of stuff. I also believe that in the future, if we envision how we're going to get this state capitalized so we can do smart, good things for the country, not just for Montana, that we also have a real estate transfer tax. I love this one. Right now, the highest per capita sector of income in this state are realtors. There's thousands of them in the state. I've got a lot of friends that are realtors. But when you sell a $300,000 house that 10 years ago cost $75,000 and you sold that house 3 or 4 times, it's pretty good money, 6%. And you sell a $14 million ranch over by Big Sky, 6% is a lot of money. Now, all I'm saying is it's the old Robin Hood thing, you know. You take from the rich and give to the poor. If, in fact, real estate is so valuable, see what's happening is we don't even know what's going on here. We used to harvest trees. We used to extract ore. That was the wealth of the treasure state. It's not that way anymore. The wealth of the treasure state is the perception that our real estate is really valuable. That's the treasure now. And all I'm saying is that when you buy and sell it, there should be 0.5% that goes into a fund. And that's a real estate transaction tax. That goes into a fund, and man, oh man, I bet you have 50 different ideas of what to do with that money in this state, but it would be hundreds of millions of dollars. It could go, for instance, to weatherize low-income houses really well. It could go into building affordable, low-income houses that were very energy efficient, so that those people don't have to spend $200 and $300 a month to stay warm in the wintertime. Simple things like that. Maybe having the cities grow their own food and having zoning, regional zoning and planning in this state. I know these are bad words, but with regional zoning and planning in this state, so you don't have a muffler shop next to a $10 million house down the Bitterroot, what you could be doing is clustering and densifying cities, making them much richer places to live in, sustainable with their own food production, their own water conservation. And in doing that, the real estate suddenly got more valuable. It did. So the realtors win again. But we keep taking a little bit from that transaction tax to put into funds to help the rest of Montanans live smarter and live better. I just think it's something that we ought to consider doing. And I guess I'm thinking about the future too, is this conservation fund. We have the coal tax fund, the coal trust fund right now. Nobody's tapping the coal trust fund right now. But I think those of you in this room could come up with some great visionary ideas for what to do with that coal tax fund 30 years from now, because the coal won't be here forever. We, as humans, probably will be here for a long time. And I think it's incumbent on us to try to find ways of using that non-renewable hydrocarbon resource a lot more judiciously than we have in the past. So transportation, energy, whether it's produced by coal or other alternatives and renewables, are all important. And the last thing I want to leave you with is, because I'm a builder, I'm having this midlife crisis right now, and I strongly believe that we should be unbuilding things. I think we should be deconstructing, removing buildings that are useless, not and in the way, reclaiming land in urban environments for growing food, reclaiming buildings and using the materials wisely, reconstructing buildings so that they are really, truly well-performing buildings for the future. And then think about, envision a building that could actually produce energy, retain and capture water, clean water, and then a building that could produce food. And I've seen these buildings all over Europe. They actually are restorative buildings. They're not blights on the landscape. They're actually production sites for really good things in urban environments. And I also believe as Missoula grows and matures from being a small single-story, two-story town with sprawl, that we will have to begin the densification process going up vertically, and not just going up vertically with bland, boring, harsh skyscraper-type things, but perhaps terraced buildings that actually have gardens and eco-roofs on them that can capture water, and they actually are beautiful and inspiring things to look at. And in that densification, you have more people, less cars, because the city currently is already investing millions of dollars into a non-motorized, pedestrian-based transportation system. So the next thing to do would be to encourage developers to build high-density, nicely stacked ecological buildings within 2 blocks of a bicycle pedestrian trail, so that the people are right there. They don't need 3 or 4 cars. So as we mature as a city, vision this. Vision a city that's a little taller, a little smarter, a lot greener, and could produce things in the city instead of relying on Southern California, Mexico, and Argentina to feed us, and Canada to provide us water and energy. I just think this is all part of a vision that buildings could actually be assets. And as people live in them and learn to understand how they operate in a community, with all these other things I've talked about, I think it'd be a really great town to live in 30 years from now. But we have some work to do. And we have to figure out how we're going to pay for it, how do we get smart people here, and get leaders here that will help make this happen in every city in the state. And in smaller towns across Montana, having them understand that we're not leaving them in the dust. Because all of these systems I've talked about could, for a lot less money, be done in Phillipsburg, Red Lodge, Big Fork. And forget energy conservation. Don't even think about energy conservation, because I know you're half asleep. It's very boring. Think instead about, if I don't pay my power bill because I've got an efficient house, an efficient car, and a non-motorized transportation system, think of the revenue that you're keeping in the state. A friend of mine who is a researcher in Bozeman calculated each year this state spends $720 million just on transportation fuel. That all goes to Houston. Houston's, I think, Texas is like the 5th highest per capita income state in the union. So why are we giving them our money? Conservation means just simply keeping the money here so we can do things with it in our own economy. To hell with the Texans. $720 million is a lot of money to keep in the state. And that's also conserving something. So, thanks for your time.
All right, why don't we get our 4 panelists up here, and we're going to do question and answer. Maybe about a half an hour, see where we're at. So does anyone have questions for the panelists, ideas of their own?
Yeah, let's hear from the audience.
Buena?
I have one general question for the panel there. What do they think is Steve, what do you think is the population carrying capacity of this valley in a sustainable future? Is there any limit on the number of people?
That's predicated on what we consume. And we're so far beyond the carrying capacity of this state right now, it's off the charts. That's my own opinion. Mm-hmm. And it's because of we are on a hydrocarbon-based economy. We're importing, 3 billion-year-old plants that have turned into oil. And what we're doing with that is that it's the solar economy. We can only sustain ourselves if you're based on a carbohydrate-based economy. You can only use what's grown each year for food or fuel. And if you exceed that, you're screwed, really. And what we've been doing is robbing all this stored energy for the last 300 or 400 years, but it's been stored for hundreds of millions of years.
In China, the entire family, a rural family in China, family of 4, lives on 1,200 square feet. That's their house and all their productive farmland. And that's in a temperate zone.
I would add, I would just sort of echo what Steve said. It all depends on how we're living. If we can't live the way we are now, if we consume a whole lot less, maybe we could have a lot of people here. I'm not sure what it would be either. But we have to ratchet way back how we live. I would sort of add something to that. This little rant's been going on in my head for a while now. I feel like in order to get to any sort of sustainable future, we have to start expecting more and less of each other. And this comes from my own perspective, sort of being where I am at in my life right now with a little bit bigger kids and being 40 years old and spending my time, so much of my time running around, bringing kids to different things or running off to meetings to see people. And all these things that I run around and do are expected of me by my peers. The only way I can meet those expectations most of the time is through a car. Zipping all around 3 different kinds of lessons and sports and then meetings, all about doing good things. We have to expect more and less of each other. I think we should start expecting less productivity of each other along the same models we have right now. Say if everybody's going to be riding their bikes, you all don't have to be where you're supposed to be at 8 o'clock. Maybe we'll say we're going to start the day at 8:30 because everybody's riding their bike. And no one's going to be expected to be at 4 different meetings at 4 different sides of town in one day. Because we're going to be expecting more of you, and that you are going to ride your bike. You're going to put more effort into how you live. You're just going to accomplish less by our current measures. And if we start expecting more of each other and less of each other, maybe more people can live here within the natural limits we have. But we'd have to do that, expect more and less before we can ratchet down.
I see something in this capitalist system that's like exponential growth, and it requires growth in revenue, and that's not natural law. That's not. It can't be just growth. There has to be stability along with sustainability for us to reach this vision that we all share. This system has us living to work, and we're all busy working, whereas we should work to live. And there is a living to do. Spelling roads, music, friends, study. But living, we have to learn how to live, and use less. Quality life instead of a quantitative life. But I foresee this, there's a limit to growth. There has to be this limit to this value, to the number of people.
This man has a comment.
What can we do to slow or even stop the conversion of agricultural land into residential and commercial usage? Seems like we're losing a lot.
And you're more of an expert on zoning and all that, so you probably know that, those regulations. Wow.
Well, I guess, say for instance, you take out Mullen Road. And we were told that the people who owned a lot of the land out there, they were required to pay for the sewer, and they didn't have the money because they had all that land to pay for the sewer, so to them it was, the thing that they could do was to develop their land, and they tried to develop it in a good way. So I think that you have to change the psyche. You have to go, somehow have to make that switch to support local. What choices do these people have in the way things are set up right now? So that we aren't saying that agriculture is so important to us, and it's part of our culture. It's part of the fact that almost over 90% of our food is coming from outside the state. What are we going to do about that if things happen? Why aren't we more invested in preserving our agricultural land? So, the pressure on them, plus if it were, as Steve, it's just a such a combination of, and it's happening all over the country, this idea that we want building now that we've been discovered and people want to live here.
Go
ahead.
I feel like there's a little bit of a a lack of vision or understanding or education, let's say, on the part of landowners, at least the west side of town where I live. They're, for the most part, these people are understanding that they can have someone cut hay on their land or graze a few cows and really make no money. Or they can sell it off and make a whole bunch of money. And that's all, those are their only options, is what to do with their land. And if we could decide, culturally, that preserving this land for farming is really important, not hay and cows, but actually growing food for people to eat, that's important, maybe we could build some other mechanisms into the equation to make it happen. So then when this landowner is faced with a decision, she can sell out for millions of dollars or make $250 a year. No, she could do something else. She could set it in some kind of, I'm just making this stuff up, some sort of land, a conservation land trust for agriculture. And then another pool of money would fill that gap between the ag value and the development value, which is really what she as a landowner needs to recoup. But maybe this person, if they knew about it, would love to see a farm there actually growing food for the town. But if that's her retirement and that's her land, it's a lot of cojones on our part to say she can't have that. So maybe we take some of this new revenue that Steve really, those great insight described, and take some of that new money from taxing real estate transactions and use that to fill the gap between ag value and development value, so a landowner can recoup a return on their investment and the land can be preserved. We need some more money and some more political will. Those are great ideas on how to come up with the money. I think that if people knew that there were other options, they wouldn't always build out. They're building out for the bucks. But if the bucks could come from some other way besides building the houses, I bet a lot of them would choose not to build the houses. Because it's that they want the money, not that they want the houses. They want the money. Well, for a lot of these are people who are cash poor and land rich, and they're getting older. And for sure there's a bunch of people out there who are greedy sharks, but there's a lot of people who aren't. Yeah. But they're faced with these decisions, and you can't blame them in a sense. But if we could come up with another way to get them the return on the investment from owning that land, besides building houses, then I think we could actually successfully preserve the land.
Well,
but until we get that money in there, I don't think it's going to work.
But I believe you can, it's not an either-or situation. We could build houses much differently than we do.
Sure.
If you have a 10-acre parcel of good land out to the west of Russell, why can't you cluster the houses on 2 acres and have 8 acres for ag and ponds and all kinds of stuff, instead of stamping out lots, single family, where you end up with knapweed and more people burning gas to mow the lawns. The paradigm that we think about development is single-family homes stamped out across a very fertile landscape, as opposed to clustering the houses, doing it smart, and then leaving the rest of the land for other purposes that involve, ecological work.
Yeah, I was mentioning these sort of performance bonuses for density for developers to say, okay, if you preserve 8 acres, you can have higher density on those other 2. Maybe that's one way to get there.
Matt, you got a question?
Yeah, so if we create these incentives as a culture or political will or taxing mechanisms to try to preserve the space, how do we address the question of we need farmers to farm it that much and a lot more for food? And you mentioned that the people there are getting older, their kids are not staying on the farm, so
these aren't even farms I'm talking about.
Okay.
These are just houses on 5 to 10 acres on the west side of town where there's some hay.
We'll talk about Vermont. Isn't there a place in Vermont where they take interns?
Yeah, I really should let Matt finish.
Well, that's what I thought he was going at.
Well, I'm trying to get at the sort of cultural phenomenon of why people are moving from rural places to urban areas and how to kind of reverse that trend culturally more than...
Could I field this?
I'm just not sure the incentives will necessarily do it. And also, how do we value farming more economically? How do farms become more viable?
I think we need to look first at what tools we have in the toolbox, okay? One of them, in terms of economic incentives, one of the really serious tools we have is insurance. You really can't do much, especially in a commercial nature or even in a residential, without insurance. Now, right now, the only considerations that insurance have are making of money, and the only fallback that you have is if the insurance company can't pay for a major disaster, for example, they go to the federal government. If the federal government refuses to insure people who are living in the floodplain, if they refuse to finance homes built on the edge of a Malibu cliff, et cetera, you're going to have a tremendous impact on what the economics of development looks like. At the same point, you can use the same vehicle to increase the appeal of clustered housing. Clustered housing is a natural thing. If you go across the landscapes anywhere in Asia, from China to Europe, everything is on the village system. You don't go 50 miles between major urban centers. You go 10 kilometers in between villages of a couple hundred people, And the thing that has changed, the part of the equation that's become completely imbalanced in the last 60 years or so is free transportation. We can go anywhere for free, for nothing. Used to have to walk all day to get that type of distance, or make a serious effort. Because we've eliminated this transportation consideration, that's where sprawl comes from. You raise the price of travel pretty precipitously, or you direct travel along the lines or along the locations where you favor development and ignore other areas so that you can use these as open space or as agricultural lands. You've got some tools here. There are ways to approach it. I don't think that we have the answer here tonight, but there's places to start.
I would say about where the farmer's going to come from. If we look at what used to be called truck farming, where you grow produce on the edge of a town and haul it in on your truck, there are a lot of aspiring young truck farmers. I get to have this job of training them and working with them. If land didn't cost $100,000 an acre, and nobody even swore when I said that earlier, you should have been free to, there'd be plenty of them. But what's dissuading them and discouraging them is, how do you get into a business like that? Now, if you look at grain farming, the get big or get out has that philosophy and sort of outlook means that in order to farm, you have to be really, really big. And in order to grain farm and make any money, being really big means you have to have about $500,000 in gear, just in stuff alone. This is a capital obstacle that makes this a business that is impossible to get into unless it wasn't your birthright. So we come up with ways to make those big farms in the countryside smaller, meaning are there other things we can grow where growers can make a living? I think that would be one way to start. On the other part of your question, for the truck farming part, I think that the farmers are here. We just need to figure out a way to make it affordable. I know something's been done in Japan with taxes, where there's rice farmers on small tracts of land, on really, really expensive land, and I don't know how the public in Japan has managed that, but I know these farms.
Subsidize rice prices. Well, that's the cost of rice in Japan is over. Well, when I was there 15 years ago, it was $10 a pound, and that's how they do it. It does work, but.
There's lots of bits and pieces and things that you guys are talking about that are pretty exciting. But one of them, I hadn't heard this thing about the carbon footprint and the energy importing into California and Arizona. But you could look at that on the same principle in Montana. Okay, we're not going to take strawberries from somebody that's got water that's coming from, across the Continental Divide from where the farm is. I mean, you could lay out some of those old tomatoes and do the same sort of thing. But the real price of a strawberry in October on the produce in the grocery store. What is the real price? The price of the water, the price of the transportation, the price of all the subsidies that have gone in to get that strawberry here. And then you start understanding that growing food locally has a real value. If the real value is known for some of the other...
I've heard people refer to this as a true accounting. If we could actually account for the ecological damage and all the real costs of getting that strawberry, growing it, using all the chemicals, paying people a living wage, and then getting it here, local food would look really good.
The dams and the irrigation systems,
yeah.
on and on and on. Okay, so I have a question for you guys that have been around here for a while. you've been, 30 years ago, you're talking about being in a summit, Steve. Have you seen some positive, what are some examples of some positive things that have been happening throughout the community in those 30 years, either in building, energy, farming? I mean, there's.
I mean, I could just do a couple, and then let you guys do a few. The bike paths in Missoula.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I went to college here in the 80s. It didn't exist. The river had this kind of green color to it. You would never go swimming or fishing in that river. Now it's just this great asset. Talked to somebody, I don't know if somebody mentioned inversion, or I was thinking about something else. We used to have stage one day after stage one day. We got the air cleaned up. The downtown used to be boarded up and crappy. Now it's a little boutiqueified, and we've lost some of that rough around the edges culture that I loved when I first moved here. But it's vibrant, and it's a focal point of local culture. Those are great gains. The farmers market is huge. The farmers market generates, by my guesstimation of how much people earn there, I have a stand there with my family, so I have an idea, and I'm just looking at what other people have, more than $1 million a year. I know the Good Food Store alone spends more than $250,000 a year on local farmers getting food in. The Good Food Store itself has grown 3-4 times since it started. Now it's huge. All these are giant gains that in 1985, I don't think anybody would have believed that you could make this much money at farmers market, that we would have a river you'd want to swim in, that you could bike from the west side or east to west along the river, along a beautiful, clean river, on a trail. I mean, these are great gains. Like, as much as we've seen the Costco Valley rise, we've seen this good stuff rise. And people have asked me, who I used to live here in Missoula with years ago, who've left, how has it changed? And I'd say, it's just more of the same. There used to be a little good and a little bad. Now we got a lot of bad and a lot of good. It all just amped up. And these are other long-term residents here.
Well, I concur with Josh. We're also seeing more multifamily housing. We're seeing more densification in the city. We're going to start seeing, I think, more verticality. So the densification has begun. And I think the city's investment in blighted areas, the city's investment in pedestrian bridges and walkways and trails is a very interesting, instead of investing in a big parking lot and a wide thoroughfare of pavement to attract development, although that is going on in North Reserve, the city and the inner city is starting to invest more in softer and lighter ways of attracting people into the downtown. So we're seeing more green building parameters going on. We're seeing denser houses. I think overall the housing stock is better. The turnover is occurring where housing stock is getting better. Energy efficiency is happening in windows and in heating systems so that we're having less of a carbon footprint, I think, in the state. Coal Strip ended up being 2 of the best coal-fired thermal plants money could buy at the time. They really were. But it was because the citizens of this state held Montana Power's company's feet to the fire. Those are good plants. Now they're 30-some years old. So if we're going to get any new coal plant in this state, I believe it should be the smartest technology we can provide. But frankly, I don't think we need it. And I think the citizens of this state should take over the power company and get our dams back.
Positive, Steve.
Well, that's positive. Taking over the dams,
I love
getting our
that.
power back.
That is positive.
That's really positive.
I love to see
That's really important.
Definitely shouldn't sell it to Australians for cheaper than the cities. What's up with that?
Just don't get that.
Luann and Larry, do you?
Well, I think about the university. They had a chance to do a lot of green building when they built down at the south end, and I'm not sure Bob worked on that. I don't know how far they got with that, but they are doing this, buying local food for the cafeteria.
That's great.
That's a big step.
Over $1 million so far.
Yeah.
They've spent on local.
That's great.
And then taking down the dam. People have been wanting to take down that dam for 30 years out in Milltown. I don't know how that's all going to work out in the end, but I mean, it's got to be a big step for us. It's going to change everything. And people are thinking, we're talking more about it. So, we just want to rush the process, I think. But because of all the things that are happening globally, we're so much more aware globally of what's going on, the global warming. So we have all these groups in town that care about that and what we're trying to do about that.
Speaking of bike paths, Bob, you had a question?
Yeah, commenting question. Because the issue of
strawberries that you get from far away that you buy here, or I think it's kind of ludicrous that you can get apples cheaper from Chile than in Stevensville.
It is.
So we know that part of it, it's not a fair playing field. It's propped up. The oil system, the way it gets subsidized in one simple way is when new pipelines are laid in this country, it's the taxpayers that pay for that. The eminent domain to buy the property, that's just one of many ways that the oil system is so subsidized that we have this crazy playing field. We can't make rational, really, decisions. I mean, if money is the goal, which under this system it is, it'd be ludicrous not to tap into this free oil system. So I guess two strategies, it seems like. One is to continue this type of thing, that sustainable Missoula, sustainable Montana, that's got to be a goal beyond money and bottom line. But I do worry about the system we're under that does say develop every bit of coal in this state, burn it up, sell it. I mean, how do we can't just sit back and maybe we all choose our own, where we put our energy, but it seems like it's got to be a holistic way. And I like what Larry, you said about insurance. Maybe with climate change, there'll come a point where industries that are based on fossil fuels can't get the insurance they need, or there'll be some accountability is what I'm thinking might happen, and that turning point seems to be coming.
You know, what's interesting, Bob, is a lot of the global warming conferences I've gone to in the last decade are financed by insurance companies.
Big time.
They're freaked out. They cannot continue to pay for these catastrophic losses.
Sure.
When you're seeing a quadrupling of hurricanes and in their intensities against North American real estate and property, it's enormous. They're taking hits that are just unbelievable. They want to understand what's going on with it, and they want to help encourage alternatives so they can save money. It's about money for them. And if it means better living for us and less dependence on global warming energy production systems, then that's all good. But it's interesting that the bad guys are paying for a new way out. And ARCO and BP and some of these oil companies, hey guys, I've gone to their conferences too, and they're saying, they got the oil, okay? They're saying that we can choose conservation or we can choose performance and speed. And we've made a choice.
And they're going to, these car companies are dedicated to giving customers what they want.
Performance and speed.
Well, it was right in the paper today, there was an article, when you're talking about that cellular.
Cellulosic ethanol?
Yeah, they're talking about some of the big oil companies now are putting aside millions of dollars for research. I mean, it's like the big guys seeing what organic farming, as soon as if it is about money, let's use it, you know, to our betterment, or use it for our good. Now they're saying, oh, well, that looks like an alternative energy, or that kind of wind or solar, that might be a way to go. So they're putting money into research, just like they buy out. That's why these guys, the farmers, have gone to homegrown, because the big guys started buying out organic. And we knew it would happen once we had a really tight organic system in Montana, and then it went, federal standards came down to state standards. And once it becomes homogenized, or it goes big like that, then you know you have to go back and start again. So now it's homegrown. And someday they'll be buying Josh out, but it's okay.
But this ethanol thing it's not a panacea. You guys have to understand this.
Yeah.
Right now it's ADM, Cargill, and the big boys that are
That's
pushing
right.
corn-based ethanol to fill your tank. Nobody is talking about better fuel efficiency in vehicles or encouraging
Right.
our buying of vehicles like that. That's why this rebate thing is so interesting.
And it takes 2 units of
runs in the red.
energy.
It runs in the red.
You're only getting a third of the energy that you have to put into the operation.
Those guys you just mentioned pushing ethanol, this is another place to hide corn. Because the soft drink
Exactly.
market is full, and you got to find more places to hide corn. It's not about anything else.
And high fructose corn syrup is finally getting the bad reputation it deserves. It can't get better.
Does it? It's not stopping anybody.
But as a transportation fuel, it's totally dumb. Just dumb. And again, everything I said about all these alternatives to energy production, we shouldn't need any of them. Right now in the Pacific Northwest, in the last 20 years, conservation in buildings alone has stopped stopped the building of 40 coal-fired power plants. Conservation bought that energy, so we didn't have to build the coal-fired plants. And that's just, we haven't even hit the low-hanging fruit yet, really, in conservation. It's the cheapest way to get energy.
In Seattle, they're allowing them to build, you can build a higher building the greener you are.
It's a performance.
It's performance-based, and that's what we need to get to.
All right, why don't we take a couple more questions?
I just wanted to say that I see a lot of wonderful ideas and a lot of vision, and it appears to me that the environmental movement is searching for solutions, comes up with a lot of good ones. Science kind of creates a problem, we clean it up, create more problems, clean it up again. And to my perspective, what we need is a change in our worldview. When we have a government that's for profit, when we have all these corporations that are strictly for profit, and what makes me ill in Missoula, if you want to put it specifically, is we have places called mansions, the mansions on the hill. Well, we even call them mansions. We have no embarrassment about that. We have 30 pairs of shoes in our closets. That means we don't care. Too many of us. You guys care. Did you notice the kids left? Look who's here. Responsible except for these girls, right? Yay.
And those girls.
Some young blood in the room.
There's some young blood.
Yes, we're desperate for you. It's a change in worldview that has to take place. And we have to respect the earth, we have to respect our environment, and I love the solutions, and I think it's really important what's going on, and I think we all need to be active, but we need to work on our worldview. We need to change the consciousness of the American people, or the worldwide people. And I had a question for Larry. When you said that you were going to bury the slash out in the woods, were you expecting the fungus to deteriorate the wood?
Oh, yeah.
And there's enough funds to do that? What about using that for a biofuel instead?
Well, that's what you're doing. Food is a biofuel.
But not all of it. They're slashing. They're burning it.
I think one of the problems that we have in talking about energy is that we really fail to appreciate the amount of energy represented in a gallon of gas. Now, I just saw that an analysis done on the carbohydrates or the reduced carbon energy stored in a gallon of gas, and I believe the number was that it was 1.8 acres worth of wheat was required to do that. I'm not real sure the numbers. Maybe somebody can help me there, but
It's incredible. Steve Nelson, Steve Nelson did a thing in my class once about the potential energy in a barrel of oil, and there's nothing else like it. It's incredible.
We
don't have any other material that packs that much energy to a punch.
Which is silly to do,
That's why we.
better ways, but something like all that slash out the wood,
well, this is what I feel is a better way, because like you say, we're lighting it. Give me the best, most efficient conversion of fire to energy, to electricity, you're talking 40%. I'm talking biological conversion in the 90s. Okay, you're not even close. Once you get involved in biological processes, your utilization of the energy represented in reduced carbon is orders of magnitude better than any type of mechanical system that we have.
But the key element here that we forget in this culture that can't wait 3 minutes at a drive-in for a hamburger, Larry's talking about a very slow burn. And that's what food and composting and fungal production is. It's a very slow burn of energy. So you're producing carbon, but it's a very, very slow yield over a long period of time, as opposed to a flash fire or burning gasoline quickly. And this is something that, can the culture wait? Can the culture slow down its demand for flash fuels and fast carbon production? And that's a real key element.
And this is what I say, we have to expect less of each other.
And of the land.
Time-wise. And the land, everything. We're not, we go with this 100-mile-an-hour pace, and that needs to...
Gotta go over
Yeah,
here.
why don't we take this as the last question, so we...
This will be quick. Well, one, actually, since you mentioned fast food, I saw a sign today in the Bitterroot that said, if you are what you eat, then America must be fast, cheap, and easy. And I kind of like that. That's not my question. It's kind of on a lighter note. It's for Larry. And it's just it's in the spirit of sustainability. I really like this. I did some reading on microremediation, but I don't know that much about it. But I've heard that you can use mushrooms to clean up toxic waste, and that it's so efficient at cleaning up the waste that, and like you said, it doesn't absorb it. It uses enzymes to catalyze it into different substances. That it's so efficient that you can eat the mushrooms. They're safe to eat.
Absolutely, yeah. Stamets analyzed the oyster mushrooms that he grew on penta-contaminated diesel fuel that the Washington State Department of Transport provided for him. They also did this it was a part of a series of trials. They also used genetically modified bacteria and other things. And the oyster mushrooms not only completely took the stuff out, there was no residual chlorinated hydrocarbons in the fruiting bodies. So yeah, it really it's peer reviewed.
And Larry's going to do a demonstration at the farmer's market on Saturday.
We're going to eat oyster mushrooms, yeah. We can do that.
All right, so thanks for coming, sticking it out. Along the same lines of a sustainable Montana, our next panel on the 24th of October, which is my mom's birthday, is going to be actualizing the restoration economy here in Montana, which we're talking about a sustainable Montana. It seems like restoring our forests and watersheds is all part of that sustainable future as well. So thanks for coming. Thank you.